Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are proud to be Baltimore, all sponsored by our friends at Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast, as well as our friends at Sporticulture. Bringing out, and the lava is beginning to flow here. I just turned the lamp on. It's early. It's week one. Luke Jones joins us now from north of the border, where he was one of the few, the proud, the dozens who attended the Ravens game on Sunday. I am planning on heading off to Houston this week. And, Luke, you can tell me all about how lonely it was and all that. And everything about my day was weird, right, after 24, 25 years of this. But I would say that watching the press conferences and doing all of this stuff, I don't know that it wasn't weird for everybody, right? Like, you sort of universally. And, I mean, Al Michaels couldn't get used to it in the big old stadium in L.A. that, I was envisioning what 100,000 people would look like there and what they thought it was. Nothing was as it appeared on Sunday except Lamar Jackson. And once we suspend everything and the movie starts, we picked up right where we left off, didn't we?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, everything about the Ravens' 25th season opener was so strange. I mean, you're so used to a 71,000 seat stadium just being whipped into a frenzy, whether it was Ray Lewis doing the squirrel back in the day, or the last couple of years, the grip that Lamar Jackson has on this city. And to not have that, it was so strange. I think the strangest moment for me, sitting from the press box, beyond just the strangeness of driving into an empty downtown and how quiet it was when the Cleveland Browns came out and there was no reaction whatsoever. No booing, no anticipation knowing the Ravens were about to be.
I owe them two middle fingers when it's over with. I'll tell you that right now.
Right.
I'll go to Cleveland and give it to them in December.
But just those moments where you're just it's so baked in to hear the crowd noise from the booing of the opposition coming out to that anticipation, whether it was, where the streets have no name or, they've switched to Metallica for whom the bell tolls when they're introduced now, to not hear that anticipation, to not hear that rise in the crowd, knowing that we're about to kick off the season and to see real live NFL football. It was strange. But through all that weirdness, through the fact that the Ravens didn't even run the ball particularly well on Sunday, you had Lamar Jackson coming off of a historic 2019 MVP season, leads the league in touchdown passes, NFL single season record rushing for a quarterback, and he looked just like the Lamar Jackson of last year, only maybe a little bit better. I mean, he had plenty of great passing days last year, so I don't want to sell him short on what he did from that standpoint. And we are talking about the Cleveland Browns, who were incredibly banged up in the secondary, and still suspect as it is, even if they're fully healthy. But he was the best player on the field by a wide margin, and he's always quick to take credit or to give credit to his teammates and say they make his job easier. Mark Andrews said it best. No, it's the other way around. He makes all of our jobs easier, and that was very much the case in the 38-6 win on Sunday as the Ravens kick off the season on a bright note.
Yeah, I would say with garden variety, 4-touchdown win. For me, there were a lot of things that stood out. And everything that was predictable for guys like you and me that have been around this for a decade, knowing where the talent level was. But, man, a couple things. I forgot how good Marcus Peters is, right? And the fact that I don't have to deal with him and Marlon Humphrey and go in the locker room and try to talk to those guys. I'll probably like them a lot more on Sunday afternoons, not getting to know them a little better. Patrick Queen, obviously, but just sort of how stacked they are. I mean, it's one thing to get Peter King on the phone or get Brian Billick on the phone or any of the analysts, or you'd say, well, they were 14-2, and what did they do? I mean, they gave away a first-round draft pick in Hayden Hurst, right? That is, like, who can play? And they just said, and they've brought in different parts. Eric, John, the organization, COVID, the coaching them up, drafting guys they really wanted in positions where they really felt like this guy can plug and play. This guy, what are we going to do with Dobbins? Oh, my God, we have too many running backs. We'll figure it out. They got a lot of really good football players on this team, man, and that there's only one football, literally, sure. And there's a lot of good football players.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, that if you look around the league and you see the different rankings as far as talent assessment, who has the deepest and most talented roster, I mean, the Ravens are either one or in the top 2 or 3 almost by a consensus around the league. And look, I mean, ultimately, they're going to be judged on what happens in January, assuming they get there. And 1-0, there's still 15 games to go and a lot of potential pitfalls and booby traps along the way. But I mean, this team it's Super Bowl or bust. We've talked about this, understanding the context of the pandemic and the challenges and the uncertainty with that. This is a team that if they don't at least get to the Super Bowl, it's going to be regarded as a disappointment. I think that's just where they are right now from a talent level, from a standpoint of what they did last year, how last year ended. I mean, that's just where they are. But when you acknowledge that and then sit back and watch what they did on Sunday, it's not as though it was a perfect performance. I mean, I already mentioned they didn't run the ball particularly well. I'm not overly concerned about that or anything, but it just speaks to they won't
missed
even fire.
Marshall Yanda.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we'll talk about. I mean, Tyree Phillips, a rookie, third-round pick, started there. I mean,
Then Ronnie Stanley turns an ankle, and all of a sudden, something that was a strength that you need becomes a question to some degree, right? I mean, like when Macari went, it's something we've been doing really well, but how many of the missing parts? How many, lottery pick, Ronnie Stanleys and Marshall Yandas can you be missing with, pinning Hollywood's foot and Mark Andrews not right last year? That's coming, right? The dings and the nicks and all of that. That's going to be around the corner. We're into the season now.
Right, and that was one thing that when I look at this offense, and as I made my 10 predictions at WNST.net, one thing I mentioned was I think statistically they're going to have some regression. Not that they're not going to be one of the best offenses in the league and still be a championship caliber football team, but you just look at how special things were last year, how the stars aligned last year in terms of the health they had specifically on the offensive side of the football. Yeah, Marquise Brown wasn't 100%, but he still played 14 games. Mark Andrews wasn't 100%, but you still look at what he did. They stayed very healthy on the offensive line. I mean, you just don't know if all those things are going to happen. But going back to your point about the overall talent level, they have so much talent in so many different phases and areas of the field that you can afford to lose a Marshall Yanda at right guard, knowing he's a future Hall of Famer, knowing that whether it's Tyree Phillips or DJ Fluker or Patrick Macari or whoever's lining up there on Sunday, that you still have so much talent elsewhere that, okay, maybe you don't have a Hall of Famer at right guard, but you might be better at 3 other positions on the field than you were a year ago or than you were 2 years ago.
Well, you also are not paying a Hall of Famer of $15 million to play right guard.
I mean, that's always the give and take of this. And we're going to be talking about that a whole lot over the next couple of years as more and more guys get paid.
You thought you didn't like it when they paid Joe Flacco after they won the Super Bowl, right?
Well, I mean, it's not just Lamar Jackson. It's Ronnie Stanley, Marlon Humphrey.
Well, and it's also, and I don't want to get too far out because they have championships to win. And, I'm watching Matt Judon make all his money and Calais Campbell, Pat down, like all of that. Brandon Williams got his money. That there's plenty of guys that have already gotten paid. But I remember how lopsided this thing. By the way, this is my free plug for Baltimore Positive, which is coming this week. I've been going through like all this WNST Classic stuff over 25 years, and obviously I had a little more time on my hands, not being out at the stadium, not being in Owens Mills, all of that stuff. And I went back to like that 04, 5, 6 area because I found a lot of, Ogden was still around, and there was Bart Scott, and there was Ray Lewis, and they had a lot of Haloti. I mean, they had a lot of guys in sort of their prime. Suggs, the whole deal. Ed Reed at that time, and they were so lopsided, right? Like they were just paying one side of the ball. That's going to be an interesting thing as to who they want and who they don't want. And I think it'll all play out that if they go to the Super Bowl and they're that team, everybody they're going to lose 4 or 5 guys the way 01 did, the way 13 did. 13 lost a little bit more because they had so many veteran guys, but this would be different. There's just so much talent. I'll be saying that all year. I'll be saying all year they have, I don't want to say Pro Bowl caliber, but they have somebody that's a plus talent. They're not rolling around with 5 guys they'd like to replace at the edge of the roster. And they've done that even in good years, right? Like maybe that's the delineator between being 10-6 and thinking you could be 14-2.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talk about it a lot. I mean, the margin for error in this league, and not even so much the margin for error, although that's true as well, but the difference between great and good and good and bad in this league, I mean, it's not all that terribly much. Sometimes it can be the matter of a couple players, but that's where the depth of this roster and the ability to be able to endure some injuries. I mean, it's not as though it's a perfect roster top to bottom. We saw it on Sunday. I mean, the pass rush, again, wasn't something that's ferocious. I think they're going to have to rely on the blitz once again. But when you have a secondary as deep and talented as what they have, you can do that. You're able to do that. And you bring in someone like a Calais Campbell, who may not get 13, 14 sacks himself, but when you're talking about a 6'8", 300-pound guy that can line up on the edge as a 5 technique or slide inside in some of those sub packages, you can do a lot of stunts and twists off a guy like that. I mean, there's just so much
You have to
flexibility.
account for a 6'8" human being. I mean,
exactly. I mean, we saw it on that first drive. I mean, a batted down pass, and then he deflects another pass. It's picked off by Marlon Humphrey. I mean, so he didn't sack the quarterback on that drive, but you saw what kind of impact he can have on back-to-back plays just by his sheer size. But the pass rush, I'm not looking at that as a huge strength for this team. But when you look at the strengths they do have on defense, and then when you throw Wink Martindale and his creativity and his aggressiveness in there, they made it work last year, and I have full confidence they'll make it work this year. And you hope along the way that a guy like Jalen Ferguson, who was pretty quiet and actually didn't play all that much on Sunday, that he comes on because he's a younger guy, and you're wanting those younger guys to come on as the season goes on. But they have so much talent, and there's so much promise. And there's some guys that you're going to be looking to improve as the year goes on, and they'll inevitably have some challenges, whether it's health or something from a scheme standpoint. Or last year we saw the deficiencies at inside linebacker, but they have the flexibility to be able to address that, and they have more than one option at many of these spots. So that's where going back to the Earl Thomas problem, for example.
Earl who?
They plug and play Deshaun Elliott, who I would expect he's going to have some hiccups, and he missed a tackle at one point, but we also saw him explode with closing speed to tackle Kareem Hunt on one play where he looked like he was shot out of a cannon. So you're going to see some young guys like him have some hiccups, but hopefully along the way really start doing some things where you say, wow, that's not just good for right now. That's good for the next couple years when we're talking about this team starting to get more expensive with some other positions and other guys you're going to have to pay. That's where you need some of those younger, cheaper, under control guys to step up for you. I mean, that's how you keep this thing going long term. But as far as what we saw on Sunday, I mean, I can't say I was shocked by anything. I'm not surprised by anything Lamar Jackson does anymore. I mean, I'm just not. We could talk about relative weaknesses, and I use the term relative very strongly there. We can talk about January, and I mean that question's not going to be answered for 4 more months. I mean, that's just the reality of where we are. But you just look at this football team and everything they do well, and even some of their quote weaknesses, they aren't things that you feel are going to derail them in any way or take them off a path from where they're going to be one of the best teams in the league. And right there in my mind with Kansas City duking it out for the top spot in the AFC.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on the Twitter thing and the Instagram thing and the Facebook thing and the WNST thing. And the Baltimore Positive merger we're about to go through. Big appreciation to our friends at Raskin Global. You can find Leonard Raskin out on the front of Baltimore Positive as well as with us each and every week. Todd Schuler from Blondell Miller Schuler. I think Mark Miller's just going to continue to hide from me, but you can find them at damngoodlawyer.com. And Todd's going to be joining us every week. And Bill Cole from Cole Roofing. I got my Cole Roofing mug out. More than just the community and charity series now, the entire Baltimore Positive project, sort of inspired by my friends at Cole Roofing. So giving them a shout out. Now 101 years old. The Ravens now 24 into season 25. I'm getting older. I decided not to shave this week. I figured, you know what? I'm going back to the grizzled look until I get to this. But having watched some basketball early in the bubble, having watched a decent amount of hockey, not a lot by my standards or whatever, but, I've watched enough hockey. I've paid attention to hockey a little bit because Trott's been involved, not going real well there, but and a little bit of the soccer, and soccer is what it is. The guys spread out. They're trying to stay away from each other and make a run, and The silence of soccer is weird because of the songs they sing and all of that. And I usually have the sound down on Sunday mornings if I'm vacuuming and it's on or whatever. If I'm not watching, it's academic. But I will say this: the level of NFL play over the weekend, penalties aside, final scores aside, even the fact that the Eagles didn't show up and play the Redskins, and what other surprises there might be. Man, these guys want to play. They play hard. It goes back to why the sport's number one, Luke. And, I don't know what you love about professional wrestling. You and your brother sit around, you watch it, you love it. But whatever you love about life, right, over the last 6-7 months has been tested, and when it comes time to go back to a Pearl Jam show and they're going to rub me down and I'm going to stand out in the cold waiting in line and I'm going to push and shove to get into the pit and there's going to be some jackass singing the songs to, all the things you hate about whatever event you go to. And if that's the price or the concession lines or the parking or whatever the pain in the ass thing of it is, for me, this was the one sort of time, and we all said, well, what would feel normal? Is anything normal? I mean, I went out to dinner with my wife on Saturday, went to Ruth's Chris. Thank you, Steve DeCastro and everybody. We went out and saw Eddie Lauer. I was down at the Pendry with Juan. I ran into former Ravens on the streets again, as I do every weekend. Raven champion. I ran into 2 champions from the Ravens on Saturday night from 2 different eras. So have at that. But for me, the level of play and how bad the guys want to play, and that it wasn't sloppy, fourth quarter, first preseason game.
Unless you're the Browns.
Okay, but they suck. You know what I'm saying? And that's more about the Ravens being so good.
Sure.
Right? I mean, that we're not seeing what you witnessed the other night, which was the Brigham Young Navy, whatever the hell that was, right? I was a little worried that it would really be – other than the Jets, the Redskins won, and we thought they were going to suck. So, I remember thinking the 49ers were going to go 2-14 twice, and they've been in a championship game because franchises turn really, really quickly. They turn as quickly as your quarterback, right? And I just was heartened by the fact that for all the feelings I had about whether they should or shouldn't play, and I still don't think it's a very good idea, and I still think the President of the United States holding indoor rallies in a state that's literally against the law is a bad idea. So I'm going to drop that in. That people gathering is a bad idea. Even though Jacksonville had a full crowd. We saw all 6,000 of them show up the other. I thought the level of play, it was one of the first things that when I put it on, the TV almost made it feel normal. The players paraded for fans that didn't exist. Guys were preening for the TV cameras, so you almost felt like there were cheerleaders there. I fell asleep on Al Michaels because it was just a long day for me, and I went through, and I'm going to look you in the eye. 4,851 of your blogs from WNST. I saw every one of them on Saturday and Sunday as I transferred them over to the new Baltimore Positive, which is why my back hurts. I've been carrying it. It was good, man. It was really, it was pretty along the lines of being normal for 24 hours. Can I just say that? And I haven't said that in 7 months.
I agree. The actual quality of play, and I even go back to Thursday night, how Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs look. Maybe not so much the Texans. And I think it's important, and we say this every year, never to judge too harshly or too favorably based on week 1 alone. And that certainly holds more true than ever at this point. That's just where we are. But I agree. Overall, in the Ravens game, I thought the Ravens tackling early on was shoddy on that one drive where Cleveland hit a couple of those stretch runs that we saw last year, and you're thinking, the run defense, that was the problem last year, those types of runs. They cleaned that up pretty quickly. You're going to have missed tackles. You're going to have missed tackles in week 1. Keep in mind, even under normal circumstances in the preseason, their starters play, I think last year it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 plays maybe in the preseason. It's not much. That's just where we are right now. But when you eliminate that entirely, when you have an abbreviated training camp, when you had nothing in terms of an in-person spring to get on the field, and I thought offensive line play for me, and it's still something I'll look at with a more more scrutiny over these next couple weeks, just because that's a area of the game we talk about a lot anyway under normal circumstances. But by and large, I think you're absolutely right. it felt like NFL football.
As a made-for-television event, they did a good job making it for television.
Right. I mean, I could tell
I
you right
watched it
now.
with my cat, and was sort of like, I wish I were there, but if I'm going to be there next week, so I don't feel too left out. Most people don't get a chance. You and I are the only ones getting a chance to go, and I had a lot of friends say, I don't know that I'd want to go down there with 12,000 people. Like, I don't know that it would be as much fun sitting there with, like what you saw in Kansas City and Jacksonville. So you got a little taste. I mean, they're going to play in Ohio this weekend. They're going to have people in the stands, 6,000 people.
Well, and I think to the point you just made, and I'd say this, and by no means is this a complaint, because I am in a very unique position to be able to watch a game in person and still be able to cover it and watch from the press box.
You wore a mask for 6 straight hours Sunday, right?
Well, that's that part I'm used to from being at doubleheaders and going to baseball games at this point. So I've done that, but I would say it is very strange, and as someone who's watched the Ravens practice a ton over the last decade with no one there, it felt like a scrimmage. And I don't mean that at all in terms of
because you weren't watching it on TV.
But because I was
watching
because
it was so empty, it felt like it didn't count.
I mean, it was straight.
Right.
I mean, the quality of play was very good. When I say it felt like a scrimmage, I'm not knocking the players. Even their energy level, I thought was very good. To your point, almost had a pro wrestling feel the way that they were still playing up to the cameras at some points. But it's very different in that way, and
you could see Hulkamania doing one of these in an empty studio. It's sort of like, what?
Exactly. I mean, but it is a little bit jarring in that way, in a way that maybe baseball, I was used to it, because let's face it, the last few years of the Orioles being where they were, there were plenty of nights they were playing in front of a couple thousand people where it might as well feel empty. I mean, that's just where it is. But for that to be at the stadium, it was strange in the sense that
we've all said at empty baseball games at some point. You're right. Yeah. After a rain delay, whatever, we've all been in an empty ballpark if you've been a sports fan.
Yeah. But for that to be a Ravens game where, I mean, even in their worst years, even going back to 3 or 4 years ago when attendance had some hiccups, you still weren't talking about it being empty or 5,000 people or 10,000 people. I mean, it's it's very different in that way. But in terms of it being a made for TV event, which is what sports are in 2020 right now. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. I've said that over and over again, and I'll continue to say that. It was a good product in terms of the quality of play, and I only anticipate that improving over the next couple of weeks. I mean, the Ravens didn't play perfectly, but they played it very well, and they have the MVP of the league. And for my money, other than Patrick Mahomes being in this discussion, as Mark Andrews said, the best player on the planet. Other than I think Mahomes, until Lamar gets his Super Bowl, I think you have to give Mahomes the edge there. But other than him, you're talking about having the absolute best player in the league. And when you have that, it doesn't matter if you didn't run the ball incredibly well on Sunday. And I think they'll run the ball just fine as we get into the season. But it just speaks to how incredibly talented he is and how good he was throwing the football. I mean, we saw him make throws on the run, made a couple throws outside the numbers, had the deep ball to Marquise Brown that was as he was streaking towards the sideline a little bit on that deep route. I don't want to say it was this dramatic growth, because Lamar Jackson threw the ball remarkably well last year.
He's the freaking MVP. I mean, at this point, we expect him to go out and play like that on Sunday.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
he's been doing it for a year and a half. Let's not act like all shocked by it, right?
Right. And
this is going to become the standard around here.
I do think he threw the ball with a little more accuracy on the run. There were times last year where he'd be on the run and the accuracy, and that happens to a lot of quarterbacks. It's not easy to throw the ball on the run, to be very clear. But he made some on-the-money throws in that way. But he just looked very comfortable back there. And look, did we find out the answer to the question of how will he look if they're a couple scores behind or they get off schedule? No, because the Ravens were in control of this game, and especially the final 2 drives of the first half turned what was still a close game on the scoreboard into an elementary outcome. I mean, it was over at that point with the 99-yard drive, and then they score another touchdown, getting the ball back with less than a minute to go in the second quarter. So those questions are going to be there. The questions about January aren't going anywhere, because he can't address that again until January.
Last I checked, it's still September.
And they have to take care of business between now and then. Not to say that I have any doubt that they'll be able to do that. but it's just where they are right now. And that's where you need to stay healthy and just take care of business. And they've talked about it a lot. And I keep going back to what Calais Campbell said very early in camp. And you're talking about a guy who's a 13-year NFL veteran who made a Super Bowl his very first year with the Arizona Cardinals, and they lost. He hasn't been back yet, but he said it very plainly. And it borders on cliche, but I think it's where this team needs to be at this point from a mindset is you can't win the Super Bowl today. And when he was talking in August, he said, we can't even win week 1 today. We have to focus on each day and each week and each game. And that's not always easy to do when you're talking about a team that was 14-2 and had the kind of, let's call it what it was. They basically choked.
There's been a lot of bad taste around here.
Yeah,
And guys that don't, other than Justin Tucker and Sam Cook and a couple of guys weren't around here the last time we rolled parades through the city, right? Like,
yeah, there are only a few guys left. And that's just the truth. So you still have a team that, I don't want to say they're learning how to win because they've done a lot of winning the last couple of years. I mean, from the moment Lamar took over, they've won virtually every game they played in the regular season, other than 3. That's just where they are. But there's still, there's a marathon mentality to this that they can't get ahead of themselves. And, even having a performance like they did on Sunday, they went out and they handled the Browns with relative ease. And look, that's great. But there are going to be more challenges along the way, including going to Houston against a Texans team that's probably pretty ticked off with how they played against Kansas City. And, they're coming off some extra rest as well. And then we know the Chiefs are coming to town the week after that. So it's not going to get any easier over the next couple of weeks. It's going to get way tougher than it was on Sunday. And, look, maybe the Browns end up being pretty good by the end of the year. History tells me no. And you just look at where they are. So, you don't want to get ahead of yourself. It was a very good win. I think there was a lot to like. I think there were things to correct, certainly. But you're 1-0, and you got out of it relatively healthy. The ankle to Ronnie Stanley's not something that's considered to be serious. I think they were being careful with him. Marlon Humphrey dinged up his shoulder at one point, but he came back in. So, you get through that game without any catastrophic injuries. You check it off, and you're on to Houston. And that's where the Ravens are at this point, 1-0 and feeling good about themselves.
I will be on to Houston this weekend. You can find Luke out in Owings Mills, on the web, on Zoom, in press conferences. Sometimes they allow him to ask a question. Sometimes they allow me to ask a question. We're all figuring this out. I'll be figuring out my first flight this week. We can figure out your way to Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com. You can work out. You can work in. Learn more about all the safety measures they're taking and what they have going on at planetfitness.com. They've been with us for such a long time. We're going to get the Brick family on here to talk about their charity endeavor with JW Brick Foundation as well. They had a 5K, all sorts of things getting moved around. I saw they're going to have the Masters, and we have this horse race thing coming up in a couple of weeks around here as well. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net. We are merging WNST.net with Baltimore Positive. Big thanks to all of our sponsors and a new football season. We are WNST.net, AM 1570. Towson, Baltimore, we never stop talking. Baltimore Positive.